Hello everyone and welcome back to a new episode of Pirate Racing Club. Today we are sitting down again with Ed Spencer to talk about the previous WEC races and to talk about the 24 Hours of Le Mans that is this weekend. Hello Ed, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you, Flo. You?
I'm very well too, no, thank you very much for asking.
No worries.
So I saw that you went to Monaco and Barcelona for the Formula One races as a journalist. How was that?
It wasn't too bad. Monaco is obviously one of those dream races where you really just can't escape how great it is and the glamour and the glitz and the people there, and it's very much not just a Grand Prix. It's more like a zoo mixed with some racing cars and a lot of celebrities. Spain was very different. I think Spain is more one of those just typical run-of-the-mill races that you typically get most weekends. It was okay. I think most people there wanted to see a green car win, but they got a blue car instead. So yeah, that's I think what people will be taking away from that weekend.
Yeah, exactly. The hype train is real.
It is.
Yeah, I saw you even had an interview with Daniel Ricciardo.
Yes.
How did you experience that?
Yeah, Daniel was seemed very much he seemed very very positive, very happy the way his life is going. Obviously he still wants to be back in Formula 1, that's understandable. Daniel was a racer through and through. But he seemed much more positive than when I spoke with him at McLaren, when he was looking over his shoulder thinking, I don't know what's going to happen next. Now he's in a much less intense role, and he's he can get his life back on track, and he can also just enjoy what he does, and also be in a team which he knows, and he's with a driver that he's with Max, who he gets on with. He's with Christian, who helped him mentor him during the early days. He seems very positive and very happy, and I noticed that with his energy, he seemed very content. And I think when Daniel Ricciardo is content and he's always happy and smiling, that's when you know that he's back.
Happy Daniel is a happy racer.
Exactly.
Do you see him back in Red Bull next year or somewhere else?
Red Bull's difficult because obviously Perez is there, but I mean, if there's a drive that opens up, yeah, I can see him taking it. The question is, there's not many seats that you could really say are up for grabs. Maybe you could go to somewhere like a Ferrari if, let's say, Sainz, his contract ends a little bit early, although I don't think that will happen. I think maybe you could see him at like a Haas or maybe an Alfa Romeo. I don't know. I do see him back in Formula 1, but I don't think he will go back to a team which he knows that has no real chance of fighting at the front. I think Daniel has always been one of those drivers that has wanted a decent car, and when he hasn't got a decent car, then he starts to struggle a little bit more, because he starts to have to really overdrive the car. That's not his style. Daniel's not a person who overdrives a car. He needs it to connect with him, and then he can work his magic. So I think he will drive in 2024 in F1, but I don't know where, and personally I don't know how he's going to land on the grid. I think no matter what, he's sniffing around from what I've heard.
Yeah, personally I also see him back. I do hope in 2024, since I'm a bit of a Daniel fan. But yeah, as you said, the spots are very closed at the moment. So we will see. Time will learn. So now let's go into our endurance racing.
Yes.
And let's bring everyone up to speed. And let's talk a bit about what happened so far in WEC. The first race of the season was at Sebring, where the suspected would win, Toyota. Ferrari became second. Came this as a surprise?
It wasn't really, because I think everyone expected Toyota to be quick, but I don't think I think everyone was a little bit surprised how good Ferrari was. I think Ferrari were always going to be thereabouts, but coming into the year, I think Porsche was expected to be the big challenger because of how well the reliability had got, how well the pre-season tests had gone, how reliable that car had been. And then, of course, we had a subtle hint at Daytona that it perhaps wouldn't be that way. And Ferrari had a pole position, they were running strong, and then ultimately Toyota just got back into their stride and won the race. But it was definitely not a performance. It was not a performance you could look back on and think, well, that was a disappointment. Podium in the first wet race is, it's a good achievement considering that many other manufacturers had a pretty awful start to the year, such as Peugeot and Porsche didn't have particularly strong start to the season, although Cadillac had a fairly okay start to the campaign.
Yeah, I also think that Ferrari did an amazing job actually. It was very unsuspected that they would take pole, for example. But I think eventually they would be the ones that will make Toyota their life hard at the racetrack. It's just a matter of taking the miles, I think. Then of course Portimao came, where Van Wall with Jacques Villeneuve did their first race. How did that go?
Not great. They were running okay. The car had shown decent pace at Sebring with Jack in it as well, but of course I think there was some reliability issues, and in Portimao they were running okay, and then a brake failure took them out, and ultimately Van Wall were out of the race, didn't pick up any points, and Spa was similar for them because they were running okay, and then Jack got involved in a crash with the GTM car and put them out of the race, so they were on the back foot coming into Le Mans, and now Jack is no longer part of the team because he wasn't picked for the Le Mans 24 Hours, and he and Van Wall decided to part company, which is a shame because I think a lot of people were hoping, even if Van Wall were not quick, there was a hope that maybe he could do it if the car was reliable in terms of getting the Triple Crown, but it's just not worked out that way, and whether we see Jack Villeneuve back in a top line sports car remains a difficult question to answer because he's in his 50s, and there's also there may be loads of sports cars, but there's not that many top line drives waiting for him. Most of the new manufacturers coming in, they're going to use what lineups they've had from BMW, or what lineups from IMSA, or what lineups they've had from LP2. And for Jack, it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be very difficult to see if he can get a ride with a privateer like an Isotta Francese or a Glickenhaus, or even the Pescarolo Peugeot, which is supposed to be arriving.
Do you think there is a deeper reason that they parted ways? Like of course they were not content about each other then, but maybe something else?
Maybe there may be something behind the scenes, or maybe they both saw that the project wasn't really going anywhere, and that's probably why they thought, well, we've got really no choice. But obviously we know very little about it, apart from the fact that it wasn't really an amicable split, in the sense that it was slightly messy the way it split, but I think that's understandable. There was a lot of hype into the project, and it's disappointed a little bit, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So, as you just mentioned already, not only Van Wall was disappointing, the Glickenhaus was also very disappointing. So both Van Wall and Glickenhaus are losing out to LMP2 cars, especially in the beginning of the race at Portimao, which is obviously very, very bad. So from Van Wall, you could expect some trouble since it's their first race, but Glickenhaus has been around for a good amount of time already, so you wouldn't expect things like this to happen. Should Glickenhaus just pull the plug from their hypercar program?
It's difficult because I think Jim wants to keep racing. I think there's the Glickenhaus is definitely a project that a lot of people like, and I think there's also the fact that it is a good car on its day. I mean, it got Port Monza, it's shown strong pace, it got a podium at Le Mans, so it's decent. But how do you compete with your Ferraris, your Porsches, your Peugeots, your Cadillacs, and then the BMWs and Lamborghinis which are coming? it's difficult to see the rhyme and reason behind it. The only thing I could see maybe Jim Glickenhaus doing is maybe saying, well, we might have to go into LDMH and do IMSA and maybe come to them all once every year and then run a car or two, because ultimately it's costing him a lot of money and it's gone backwards a little bit. But that's understandable with the fact that the level of competition is much higher than what it was in 2021 and 2022. It would be a shame, because I think what Glickenhaus is a very much a throwback to the old days of racing, when it was very much people would hook their car on a tow bar and drive it to the circuit and then get it off, get the prize money to afford the way home. And they built a solid operation. It's a decent car. They could easily get a customer or two in the long run, but at the end of the day they're going to be struggling. And it is a concern for Glickenhaus, but it's also a concern for, I think, WEC in general, because at the end of the day you need the manufacturers, but you need the privateers as well. And when the manufacturers do decide maybe to go, I mean, it has happened before with GT1 when all the manufacturers came in and then they all went out after a year because of Mercedes. It is a concern that you need your Risotto Franceses and your Glickenhauses and your Vanwalls to keep the show on the road. You lose them, it could be disastrous in the long run. So I hope, for the sake of the series, and I hope for the sake of sports car racing in general, that Glickenhaus do stay, because I do think they are an integral part of the series.
Going into the budget problem and the financial problems for the privateers, do you think they should do something similar like Formula One, having a budget cap that allows the smaller teams to be able to catch up more with the big companies such as Ferrari and Toyota?
I think there should be some sort of budget cap, but not as restrictive as what you have in Formula One. The manufacturers are always going to overinvest. That's the way racing will always be. And I don't think sports cars has ever... I think the concern is, you put a budget cap, you potentially scare off investors. But at the same time, you've got to find the right balance of getting competitiveness and the big manufacturers to come to still race every for 8 race weekends a year. So I think maybe a budget cap or something, maybe like you put certain fees on things, you make it a little bit easier for the privateers to turn up. But I think the problem is, you put it too restrictive, they'll be thinking, well, why don't we just go to Formula 1?
Yeah, and the big manufacturers, they will also think we can go somewhere else where we can spend the money and win everything. So
yeah,
you have to find the balance indeed. We also saw a fight between the two Ferraris where they didn't want to help each other. We could even hear some big discussions over the radios. How do you think this will evolve to the future? Will they make problems to each other and ruin races for just Ferrari? Or
I don't think they will. If I'm being honest, I think the issue pretty much died down after Portimao, and it's still a very united camp in Ferrari. Obviously, when you have two cars, you can never underestimate the fact they may one day crash into each other. But I don't really see any major concerns. I think the issue got patched up pretty quickly. So yeah, I mean, races are going to race. Races always want to be first and second. They don't want to be behind someone. So just the heat of the moment stuff, I would say.
It was also great to see Peugeot finally starting getting things together, despite their starting from the pits 2 races in a row. They were challenging Cadillac, and at some point even driving quicker than the number 51 Ferrari, who was running in 3rd place. So on the other hand, we saw some reliability issues with the brakes of the hypercars of Ferrari and Vanwall. Also, Porsche had some power steering problems. How long do you think these kind of problems will keep occurring?
I think the year itself will probably be an extended test session, because at the moment Peugeot are not quite there. They're not quite fighting with the Caddies, the Ferraris, the Toyotas, the Porsches. So I think probably see what you can do this year, and then you move on to 2024 pretty quickly because it is a decent car on its day. It's very reliable. We've seen it, blossom at times, but it is unreliable as well. I mean, it's reliable in the race, but before the race, there's all sorts of issues. That's why, they've had 2 races straight where they've had to start from the pits, and they need to get this sorted pretty quickly because with the fact that Pescarolo are coming along, at some point, a customer's going to be there as well. You don't want to deliver an unfinished product, and in fairness to Porsche, granted that they've had, as you say, power steering issues, they've been fairly consistent and the pace has been there from time to time. So Peugeot just needs to get their act together, and really 2024 will be the key test. If they are still struggling, then there needs to be a serious rethink as to the direction of the car and whether they need to drop some things which are just not working.
So the results of Portimao, Toyota dominated and won. Ferrari again became second and Porsche came in third. So after Porsche's really bad start in Daytona and all the reliability issues that we just talked about, this isn't a bad step forward, I would say. So moving on to the 6 hours of Spa, and what a race was that. Crashes, changing conditions, records being broken. 2 new hypercars joined the grid at Spa, Jota with a golden Porsche and the yellow Cadillac, which is also used in IMSA. Could you give us a quick recap of what exactly happened and made this the greatest race of the season so far?
It was, I think the drama started really on Friday. It was on qualifying when we had a real ding-dong scrap for pole position. The 7, I believe, Toyota spun off and started from the back, so it put them out of contention, and then it became a duel between the Ferrari and the Toyota, and for a brief moment it looked like Giovinazzi had got pole position for Ferrari, but track limits by, I would say, a very slim margin cost him pole, and it was going to be Toyota back on pole position. But the race, there was really a swing in which strategy to go to. Some teams were going with a dry setup, others were going more wet, and that meant that Ferrari could go ahead and really attack at the start of the race, whilst Toyota fell a little bit back. But gradually, as conditions changed, Toyota were able to ease in and really start to regain momentum. Cadillac had a good weekend, but the free car ended up destroyed at Eau Rouge. As we all know, that Renger Bagazant just lost the back end coming into the corner and completely destroyed the number 3, but luckily go out unscathed. The Ferrari of Fuoco had been looking for a podium potentially, but it crashed out of the pits on cold tyres. The 4 Vanwall, as I mentioned, with Villeneuve went out, and then the 2 Toyotas really battled hammer and tongs for first and second, and ultimately they hung on to it despite causing a few pulled necks on the Toyota pit wall. And Lydia Wadu won a class in GTM, which I believe is the first woman to ever win a race in the World Endurance Championship. So a huge historical moment for women in motorsport, and it set us up nicely for Le Mans.
Yep, indeed. Lila Wadu won indeed, which is indeed a big stepping stone, and I would say a good thing, because it can bring the momentum for female drivers in bigger championships. So we saw another reliability issue for Porsche, an electrical one. Will this be their key focus going into Le Mans, since they will possibly make or break their Le Mans with all the reliability problems?
Yeah, I think so. I think 6 hours is a good test for any sports car, but 24 hours is a totally different kettle of fish, and Porsche did have its issues. And although you have more time to get the car fixed and back into the race, it is a concern, and obviously Porsche did have that issue. Naturally, that will need to be worked on, and I'm sure they've worked on it prior to this weekend. but it is a concern, I would say, because you don't need that happening in a 6-hour race, let alone 24 hours.
Yeah, and since Porsche their history at Le Mans, they really should be at the top of their game there. So
Yeah.
we will see what they bring.
Exactly.
So in the results, we saw, of course, retirement from Van Wall, Porsche, Ferrari, and Cadillac. But the real winner here was Toyota again. They did a 1-2 and Ferrari third. With all of this knowledge, you can start looking forward to the big one, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which is this weekend. The race we all have been waiting for. This year also marks the 124 Hour of Le Mans, which is a crazy huge milestone in motorsport. And as a driver myself, I can only imagine what an honor it is for everyone to participate in the centenary one. So now, what makes the 24 Hours of Le Mans so special?
I think it's more than just a sports car race. It's a real test of driver, team, and machine, because the crews are constantly working non-stop in the week up to the race. The drivers are really tested around what is one of the most difficult circuits in the world. It takes 3 minutes to complete a lap in a top car, 4 minutes to GT, and they're constantly looking for all sorts of problems. They're looking for cars on the right, they're looking for cars on the left, they're looking for slower cars, they're looking over at the strategies, they're looking over what lap times they've got to do. So it's a real sensory overload. And for the machine, they are constantly working themselves during the night, hot weather, cold weather, and it's just a real great French sporting event. The whole country really turns out for it, and it's a party as well. It's almost like a Glastonbury mixed with a really good sports car race, and it's special. It gets you motivated to watch WEC all year, and with it being the century this year, and also through the fact that there's no Grand Prix to really interfere with it, but when, unlike some occasions where Le Mans has kind of had to play the little brother role, this is now all eyes are on Le Mans, all eyes are on the 24 Hours, all eyes will be on the tricolour when it drops at 3 o'clock on Saturday.
Yeah, it's the 24 Hours of Le Mans is just peak endurance racing, and that's why we love the endurance sport.
Exactly.
The 24 Hours of Le Mans also gives the most points in the season. I think every few hours they give points based on how the classification is in that moment. So not only is it a very special race, it's also an important one for the championship. To just speculate, how do you vision the race will go?
Yeah, I think it will be a closer run affair than usual. I think Toyota are always going to be the favourites because of how they've dominated the last 4 or 5 races, but Ferrari are looking strong on the basis of qualifying. They really looked like they had the car looks really hooked up, and they were first and second in the classification for the hypercars, so they've really got a good baseline there. Porsche have seemingly got their act together, and Cadillac are still there and thereabouts fighting in the background. So I think it's going to be a really close race. It's probably the closest Le Mans we have had since the Toyota Porsche days of 16 and 17, and with the fact that we've got the other 2 manufacturers really creeping up in the background, it sets us up nicely for what should be a fantastic race.
Yeah, I can only agree. So the field is gigantic this year, 62 cars with 16 hypercars. Will it be a risk in terms of crashes and long-term safety car periods?
I think there's always that risk that there's going to be a long period of safety cars, and because of the fact that we have so many different type of cars, and we have the different speed levels they're going, it will always be a risk. There will always be the worry that we will get a long safety car, and some of these hypercars have proven to be quite unreliable at times in this season. So there is that added risk, but I think it's really not as much as I would say like last year or year before or 2020, when there was always that feeling that we could get a longer safety car period than usual. So I don't really see the hypercars causing the problems. I think we would just have a typical Le Mans style caution period or four course yellow. I think the only thing that I can't see happening is I can't see a pile up or anything like that unless it chucks it down.
So, of course, everyone wants to win Le Mans, especially this year, and especially with just a new era with the hypercars. So, do you think that some people might try to overperform and possibly just ruin the race altogether?
That's a difficult one because, if we use Daytona as a baseline, I think everyone ran their race and they ran their strategies and ran how they wanted to run their program. I don't see that happening in Le Mans. Obviously, there is going to be that added tension with the fact that, as you said, there's more points than usual. It's the biggest one of the lot, but I don't think there'll be any we've got to take them out, because at the end of the day, one takes out the other and that's their race is done. A year's worth of work is down the toilet. So for me, it's going to be just a case of everyone running their programs. The only time we will probably see any difference in the way teams are running is probably the strategy, and that's probably because some teams will probably look at using different compounds, different fuel strategies as well, and they may want to go they may want to go shorter than other teams just to gain an outright speed advantage. But Le Mans has always been seen like a bit of a Grand Prix, not a marathon. They always go hammer and tongs in the opening few laps before the race starts to slow down and steady itself into the second or third hour, and then we get into a rhythm. But the opening hour will be crucial for the race's trajectory, because that's where everyone gets their elbows out and really goes hammer and tong for track position. Before then, they settle down and they run their programs and almost start to nurse the cars just a little bit by bit.
Yeah, I look forward to the opening hour, especially. I do hope, especially, that Porsche puts Kevin Estre in as the first driver, because we all know he just hammers it down, especially in the opening phases of the races. And imagine him doing his magic in a hypercar in the first hour of Le Mans. It would be amazing.
It would be.
So, moving on to Garage 56 with a NASCAR. They already won something this weekend at Le Mans, the Pit Stop Challenge. They are already looking like rock stars in my opinion, and I think they will become a fan favorite over the course of the weekend. What's your view on them?
Well, when the project was first announced, I was very sceptical. I was like, a NASCAR going to Le Mans? But I've been well impressed with the project. It's been run really well. Hendrick Motorsports have produced a really good car. It's quicker than GTE cars. Granted, it's had a lot of weight taken out of it, but let's not take away from their achievements. That car is quick, and it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. You don't look at it and think, oh god, it's going to be in the way of every other car on the grid. It's not like the Delta Wing, which you never knew how it was going to perform. And the team has really galvanised the spirit of Le Mans. It's got an all-star driver lineup: Jenson Button, Jimmy Johnson, Mike Rockenfeller. So you've got you've got a world champion, you've got a NASCAR legend, you've got a Le Mans winner. I mean, that is a perfect lineup just for your Le Mans adventure. The thing screams down the straights. I mean, it sounds beautiful. I don't know about you, but it just woof. And it's brought a real different audience to Le Mans. There's been a lot of Americans who have come over to cheer on Car 56, and a lot of people are discovering Le Mans for the first time. So it's been great for the race. It's been great for NASCAR, and I would like to see the project come back for maybe another year. Maybe why not have like a category where you have NASCARs and you have like Super GT cars, or you have even a TCR car maybe compete, providing they can run with them. So yeah, I'm really excited to see how this project handles the race. And I think at the moment they look good for a finish, but of course, this will be quite difficult because of how unique this project is.
Yeah, I was super skeptical about it too when they first announced it that the NASCAR would participate. But yeah, they just took it so super serious and yeah, made sure it was a good car that actually could cope with a course and a track like Le Mans. So yeah, I'm actually looking very much forward to seeing them race during this weekend actually.
So,
And as you said, of course, with with maybe them coming back for another year and maybe even dedicating a category to it, that would be amazing actually. It would be super cool. And also, yeah, not only for NASCAR it would be good, but also for WEC it will, as you said, draw a lot of attention from NASCAR fans. So it will only grow and make our beloved endurance sport even bigger.
exactly. I think also just quickly it would also give like smaller NASCAR teams a bit of an incentive to come, because if let's say you're a car that runs 30th, 31st, and let's say there's a possibility of earning good prize money and good exposure by going to them on, why not? So it could be a game changer for NASCAR in general, because it could be seen as like an extra series to gain some money for for the off season and keep them afloat, which is good for them as well.
Maybe they can even integrate it into their points for
Exactly.
the whole championship.
Yeah, why not?
Would be would be super cool.
It would be.
We also should talk about the newcomers, Isotta Francini Milano, which we already mentioned earlier. They finally tested their hypercar successfully and they are participating in the GT1 Sports Club Championship. How do you think they will keep developing and when do you see them in joining WEC?
Well, they wanted to run it at Monza, but I think they knew in their heart of hearts it would probably be quite a risk. So I think they're just going to keep developing and then really go for it in 2024. I think it's a good project and it's definitely showing real signs of progress and they're really gaining momentum all the time, but obviously they haven't gone up against a WEC competitor yet. Maybe you could have a go at WIT, maybe you could have a go at IMSA or something, or maybe enter Bahrain, but at the end of the day you don't want to rush the project. So at the moment it's going well, but obviously we still don't really know all that much because we haven't really compared it to the other hypercars and the other privateers.
So, to all our surprises, Alpine announced they have made a hypercar as well, which they will show to the world this weekend at Le Mans. What do you think of them? Do you think they will produce a very good hypercar and will they be competitive?
I think they will. I think Alpine, prior till they decided to get rid of the old grandfather car, had always been a good team. They'd always shown a strong pace. So I definitely see them really kicking on where they left off. And yeah, okay, it will probably take a little bit of time because it is a brand new car. They're still going to be learning about it throughout the season, but I think they'll do well. And for Alpine in particular, yeah, it's another good way of getting the exposure of the brand. I mean, they've already got a Formula One team, but some of the juniors like Ollie Caldwell are still are racing in WEC, so it'd be a great way of moving them up and then maybe moving them back into the spotlight at some point. Maybe they could make hypercars their home for a bit. So it's definitely good for all parties, and I definitely see Alpine adding that extra layer of home support alongside Peugeot, which we haven't really had. I think there hasn't really been two French manufacturers since Pescarolo and Peugeot were competing against each other. That you've had two French manufacturers competing for potentially overall victory. So that's an interesting storyline to keep an eye on.
As you just mentioned, it would also be possibly good for the juniors. To go into that a bit, then I would say it's actually a good idea what you just said, because maybe they can even give their female junior program also a platform there, which will only help growing the the female driver lineups everywhere in the sport. So
Absolutely, I agree with that.
So now we are fully ready for the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Next week we will be back to have a review about this weekend. So everyone enjoy the race. We will do too.
Yes.
Thank you, Ed, for joining in again.
Pleasure, Florian.
It was very interesting and nice catching up again. If you all want to follow Ed and keep up with the latest news of Pirate Racing Club, then you can find all the details in the description. Enjoy the Le Mans and see you next week.